Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1092 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. And now that you have, let's begin. Man, our theory batting average is going up significantly here in Egghead. Not that you'll ever find me complaining about such a thing. At the same time, there's still aspects of this arc that I really don't feel like I understand. Like, probably the first half of this chapter, anything that involves Kuma. We've obviously speculated some things. Something will happen. But do I think that I actually know what it's going to be? No. Honestly, to summarize my feeling for the first half of the chapter is what is going on. But let's backtrack. We'll talk about the beginning of the chapter after we talk about the end of the chapter because I feel like they might be related, so discussing the later half could help, maybe? When in doubt, you guys already know the go-to strategy of the Joeboy Theories channel. Just talk until something makes sense, yeah? Honestly, I think that we, for the most part, accurately guessed aspects of Kizaru's character. And this isn't a bad thing. Honestly, I feel like the truth is that whatever character is currently doing something in the story is my favorite, or I like them more for that simple fact. But Kizaru as an admiral, I've always been intrigued by him. I thought he was hilarious, and if a character is funny to me, then that automatically raises them a few pegs on my list. But I'm also a sucker for mystery, like we talked a lot about Aokiji recently, and the layers of the character make me like him all the more for it, and Aokiji isn't funny at all. So, with Kizaru, I was never entirely convinced that we would get more from him other than as an antagonist or present in the panel, so I'm loving every moment of Egghead right now. Kizaru is an amazing blend of a lot of different things that I like simultaneously. Another thing that we haven't talked about is I like when characters are just good dudes, right? That's one reason that I like Fujitora. He just strikes me as a good person, even if it's complicated. Same thing with Aokiji. He's tasked with this mission of killing Vegapunk, but does he actually want to do it? Absolutely not. So while he might be a villain and a part of the bad guys' organization, really he kind of seems trapped and defeated to me, which is perfect for Luffy, the guy who frees everybody. But for the last chapter reaction, we speculated that Kizaru is basically nerfed. There's a lot of conversation right now, a lot of it toxic, of how strong really are the admirals compared to the Yonko. And if I were to actually answer this, I think that we will discover that Akainu is very much a player, and probably quote-unquote Yonko level. But with Kizaru, I felt like the discussion wouldn't matter, because he's not actually doing things that he wants to do, and for that reason alone, he's likely nerfed, because hockey is about willpower. It's about desire. If you're not actually fighting for something that you want, I feel like you can never be the strongest, on the level of the strongest people in the verse, which Luffy now is. And along the same sort of thought train here, there's a question that exists as to whether or not most of the admirals, not including Akainu here, most of the admirals possess Conqueror's Haki, and what difference that would make in-game fighting-wise. Again, this is my opinion, we will find out, but I find it hard to believe that Kizaru has Conqueror's Haki. My opinion is that maybe at some point he possessed this, or could have possessed this, but by the time that you become defeated, as I see him, you would lose it. But just because he may be nerfed does not mean that Kizaru is not incredibly powerful, and I think he demonstrated this in the chapter. Like, he comes off as an absolute beast, and I think a lot of this was purposeful on Oda's part, to put Luffy in Gear 4 Snake Man and essentially communicate. This is what I took away from it, that Kizaru, the Admiral, even nerfed, is stronger than Gear 4th. Which means that nerfed admirals are stronger than the strongest Yonko commanders. For sure. Like, the simple math that I do in my head is, and this was obviously after Luffy unlocked some top tier Haki as well, including Future Sight, but he fought Katakuri. And in my opinion, Katakuri, I put Katakuri on the same level as King. I don't know if that's actually true, but they're similar enough where I respect Katakuri a lot. And so put the Yonko commander, top tier Yonko commander's bounty power level roughly, say, between 1 billion and 1.5 billion. Luffy with Future Sight fighting in Snake Man was about an equal there. And this was before Advanced Conqueror's Haki, which I'm not sure how that plays into the current fight at all. And it really looked like Kizaru did not have an issue dispatching with Luffy at this level of strength. But at the same time, I'm really not sure how much we can really take from this fight at all, because like I said, I think that he's nerfed. Coincidence or not, right? You decide. You have to form your own opinions. But we have a panel where Kizaru literally expresses that he has no desire to capture Vegapunk and that this is rough on him as well. And you see him in the panel and you've got those black lines going over his glasses of a man full of regret. And a heartbeat later, Gear 5th Luffy has him in his grasp. I want it known, I have no intention of taking anything away from Luffy. I think Gear 5th Luffy is a legitimate Yonko. Luffy is among the most powerful in the verse. I think Shanks is probably still a little bit higher, hockey-wise, and I'd be curious to see that. But Luffy is right there. That being said, I kind of half wonder whether Kizaru let himself get caught. I think at the very least that you have to admit it, this is a very awkward circumstance. It doesn't happen very often that somebody on the level of Kizaru, clearly above Yonko commanders in my opinion, defeated in a moment. Assuming of course he is actually defeated, but captured even slightly, totally caught unawares by Luffy, who is the least sneaky person that I know. I get the extenuating circumstances which makes this discussion difficult. Like, Kizaru literally blasted Luffy through the dome, which probably should have killed him, and we can see Luffy return even in Gear 5th, he's very damaged. So maybe it's fair to say that Kizaru simply thought that he one-shotted Luffy and that there was no way anyone could survive that. But even despite this, I don't think that what happened at the end of this chapter happens to a top tier ever. Not when they want to actually win. Going back to the Katakuri fight, we learned with Future Sight Haki in particular, you gotta control your emotions in order to utilize it. Like, emotions mess with your Haki generally. You have to be calm. Now, whether or not Kizaru actually possesses Future Sight is not a confirmed thing, and I'm curious if it ever will be. I mean, he's also one of the fastest people in the verse, so he could make up for not having the ability to see the future by just simply being that fast. Certainly one of these two things are definitely true because Luffy possesses Future Sight Haki and Kizaru landed a hit. So obviously Luffy was unable to avoid him. That being said, when things seem subtextual to me in the story of One Piece, I tend to believe them because Oda is absolutely capable of that level of writing on a consistent basis. And so you literally have a scene where Kizaru does not seem overwhelmed with joy at the faced with what he was about to do. And so because of that, not having his Haki being active so that Luffy can come and grab him, all of that worked for me. And I would say that for now, that's what I believed happened. Which is like saying in many words that Kizaru let himself get caught, even if that's not precisely true. And this was another prediction that we had about Kizaru. I think Kizaru is capable of killing people, and that fear, that danger is present and relevant. This being said, I predicted that essentially Kizaru will kill nobody. And the reason that I speculated this is I didn't think that Oda was going to attempt to make Kizaru out to be a true villain. And so far this prediction holds true, and I thought it particularly noteworthy, especially with Frankie and the Straw Hats next to the ship. They could have died. Hell, one of the Vegapunks was there. It would have made sense for Kizaru just to off Lilith, and then move on down the road. So my headcanon continues to be that Kizaru is too reluctant to really accomplish anything here. And it makes me wonder whether or not Kizaru is actually defeated, whether we're gonna get too much more of this fight. But yeah, honestly, with this scene in particular, I can't wait until this is animated. In the anime, I think is gonna shed a lot of light on what happened here that is just simply missed reading the manga. I think that the dome under normal circumstances would have actually killed Luffy. I think it forced Luffy to go Gear 5th so that he could alter the world around him, and it worked for the properties of the dome as well. And I think that other aspects of Kizaru's powers are going to be explained in the anime as well. Whether or not he possesses Conqueror's Haki, whether or not he is using Future Sight in any respect, I just believe that we will find out. This is one of those fights where more time with it I think is very beneficial. Anyway, you guys already know that I'm not a big power scaler. There's some aspects of this that are interesting to me, but I'm not as interested as some of you out there. So this was sort of my obligatory power scaling, and if I messed up, okay, and experts out there correct me. I do think that it's important that Kizaru was asking questions of Luffy, like, Luffy, why do you want to protect Vegapunk? this is another thing that happens in the story, but fighting is how some characters communicate, particularly characters like Luffy who aren't great at expressing themselves. And I think that Kizaru genuinely wants to understand Luffy and why he's doing what he's doing, because Kizaru is also aware of right and wrong. And I don't think that he feels like he's in the right currently. He's a powerless cog in the machine. So that's kind of how I interpreted the chapter, as Kizaru trying to feel out exactly what he believes. When he's talking to Bonnie, it's almost as if Kizaru is hoping that Bonnie will affirm his orders to kill Vegapunk. As if he's hoping to believe that this move benefits at least somebody. This has to help somebody. But even Bonnie, who has every reason in the world to hate Vegapunk, has changed her mind. And then after this, Kizaru says something really interesting of, "Don't make me hurt more old friends than I have to." And he literally taps Bonnie with the least amount of power possible. My suspicion is that Kizaru sees Kuma as a friend. And overall, this whole chapter just painted him as a dude who just appears to like people. If he has a grudge against anybody, I couldn't tell you who it is. But yeah, this was my general impression of Kizaru throughout the chapter. Nothing unexpected, just a conflicted man. Even as he defeats quote-unquote Luffy, kicks him through Vegapunk's Vega Force 01, you have a flashback where Kizaru reveals that he is aware that he just killed Vegapunk's dream. And again, he just doesn't seem happy about it. You better believe that it was intentional on Oda's part for Kizaru to kill Vega Force 01, and then at the end of the chapter, likely Luffy awakening the ancient variation of the same thing. One person is destroying dreams, another person is rebirthing them. This was actually another theory dub that we took from the chapter. Just so happened, by chance, a recent video that I made about faith. You guys, I'll link it in the description if you haven't watched it. I personally enjoyed this video quite a lot, but we speculated in there that it seems like maybe devil fruits are related to power sources, and that there will be a connection between Luffy's fruit and the eternal flame. Vegapunk describes the eternal flame as like this mini sun, and of course you have the sun god. Straight up, I feel like this chapter confirms this idea. It doesn't really explain it, which is an equally interesting facet of all of this, but it seems confirmed. The drums of liberation, Luffy's presence, reawoke the robot. Kind of like Zunisha, I imagine it could hear the drums. And this also opens up an interesting can of worms as well, because I believe that music is important to the story of One Piece. There's like spiritual things that happen with music, going all the way back to Skypiea and the Shandian's bell. It's suggested that ringing the bell calls the spirits of their ancestors, and I personally think that this is something that actually occurs. We also see during the Fire Festival, there's all sorts of activity, dancing, smiling, music, all related to the spirits of your ancestors, communicating with them, sending them a message. Which is also coincidentally what Luffy does in Skypiea as he rings the bell. It's also a message to Noland in the sea below. Your dream was real. I inherited your will and accomplished it. And the drums of liberation, drums themselves are a simple form of music. And regardless of the explanation for this, we know that the drums of liberation are real. People actually do hear this. So it gives me the impression in Gear 5th, Luffy is like a walking music box that has some effect on everything around him. And this music itself, this spirit, conveys power. But maybe it's better to not describe this as music, but just generally joy. Luffy is a walking bundle of joy energy, music being a component of that. And I'd be really interested to see Oda go further with this concept with Brook, who is the actual ship's musician. And, you know, Luffy wanted a musician from the start. The intuition, the Nika intuition kicked in. He knew it was important. But I wanted to make sure that I said this before we go back to the beginning of the chapter. Because with the robot, the ancient robot, we know that at some point in time it awakened. And it decided to climb the red line, which is exactly what Kuma is doing right now. In my opinion, there has to be a connection between these two things. So we need some explanation for the actions of the robot in the past. And from this, everything that we speculated in the contents of the chapter, I think the intuitive thought is that 300 years in the past, somebody might have awakened Luffy's devil fruit, the Nika, the sun god fruit. They awakened it and turned the robot back on. But straight up, I don't like this speculation. I don't know if it makes sense. I mean, it could make sense. Oda could include that Well, somebody did awaken the devil fruit within the last 1,000 years, and they just simply weren't successful, and this will come up in the plot in some way. But rather than that, I like to think that Nika is just a walking music box, spreading joy and laughter and dancing and fun, and all of these things are in fact the power source. Basically, the Nika fruit is not necessarily the only thing which can power these creations. His essence is related and can be recreated in other forms. So the giant robot woke up hundreds of years in the past, and the only detail about this time span that we are given is that it is related to when the world government agreed to abolish slavery. And I imagine that when this happened, there was a lot of joy and celebration. And my speculation is that this immense amount of joy, music, etc. is what turned the robot back on. So yeah guys, I'm not sure if anybody else is saying this, but I prefer this theory right now, and it certainly makes sense to me. So we have our connection between Luffy waking up the robot now and potentially how it happened 200 years in the past. But how do you relate this to Kuma? Because as far as we know, when Kuma goes AWOL and begins to climb the red line, these aren't the same sort of vibes, same sort of circumstances. So let's hold this thought for a moment. All of this has me thinking about the Ancient Kingdom and the Void Century. I presume that the Eternal Flame is an actual invention. It's real, and you would stick it into one of these robots. But if the essence of the Eternal Flame is joy, music, etc., then there's got to be a connection to things like smile. We've talked about this a lot with Luffy, but as Luffy awakens his devil fruit, he can't stop but smile and laugh all of the time. And while this seems like an overall good thing, right? He's spreading good vibes, it also doesn't appear as if Luffy is really in control of himself. He is experiencing emotions. The emotions are coming in whether he wants them or not. What does that remind you of? Smile, right? Well, now suddenly we have a connection between the Nika Nika no Mi as a devil fruit and this power source. Caesar creates a knockoff, an artificial devil fruit with perhaps similar properties. I feel like there has to be a connection. It also makes me think of the Void Century in a more dystopian way than I have prior. Again, just as a comparison to Smile Devil Fruits, smiling, laughing is a good thing generally, but you also want to express the emotions that befit the occasion. And I just wonder whether this, in relation to the Void Century, is a legitimate conversation. So if there's a clue in all this, maybe we should be looking at what triggered Kuma to begin his journey. Personally, I think that Kuma is not acting on his own. He's not in control. I think Vegapunk included technology of the Iron Giant within him. The idea is that Vegapunk borrowed Ancient Kingdom technology when designing the new technology that exists now, and there's some carryover. But Kuma is a little bit more complicated than the Iron Giant. The Iron Giant needs Eternal Flame or similar sort of power source to turn on. But Kuma's cybernetic or part cyborg, there's still human components there like blood and a beating heart, which he doesn't need the power source to be powered. But if you add the power source to Kuma, that's when I think that some sort of switch flipped. And essentially programming, leading the Iron Giant and Kuma both up the red line kicks in and has some sort of order that we don't understand. But the problem is, and I think most people realize this now, we're speculating that joy powers the Iron Giant. Well, what joy triggered Kuma? Nothing here fits. But it might fit if you twist it or change it. The event that coincides with Kuma's actions is the destruction of Lolosia. So, opposing joy, you have fear and death. This same dichotomy exists with Smile Devil Fruits, because in order to make Smile, Caesar created SAD, or SAD. And my speculation for the longest time is that SAD is made up of the souls of animals that Caesar killed. You take their souls into this green soul goop, you put it into streams of water which are sucked up by trees, and the trees then, their fruit transforms into Smile. So there's a relationship between sad and smile. My belief then is there's essentially two kinds of eternal flames, or two important power sources, one relating to joy and the other relating to death, destruction, fear, etc. Again, I encourage you to watch the video linked in the description about faith, because we touched on some of these things that should make a lot of sense, a lot more sense than it did. But the idea in a nutshell is that there is a counterpart devil fruit to Luffy's, which is probably possessed by Emu. dreams versus nightmares. But yeah, I feel like I've given you guys enough here to maybe understand the things that I'm thinking about, but I'm not sure that I've figured out the precise wording of how to convey this. So I'm going to let this linger for a little bit and just bake and see what it becomes in a week or two. But of course, the lingering question from all of this, despite our endless speculations, is what exactly is Kuma hoping to achieve at the top of the red line? What was the Iron Giant hoping to achieve 200 years in the past? I think that this is related to the Void Century. I think that we are on the precipice of some kind of reveal, and I am excited for it. But to actually give you guys an answer, we made a video on this. I'll just say I'm not too sure. But another moment of pure genius, in my opinion, for Oda in this chapter was, if you guys remember back to when Kuma was first introduced in the story, he asked people a question. If you were to go on a vacation, where would you want to go? And in this chapter, Kainu asks Kuma, where in the world could a walking corpse like you have to go? The concept that seems to be related here is desire. Desire, which is also related to devil fruits, which we spent some time talking about. Kuma gave Perona the option of going where she wanted to. And the question that we're asking with Kuma right now is he going where he wants to, or does he not have a choice? And this is given to us simultaneously with the story of Kizaru, who literally believes himself to be a cog in the machine. He doesn't get a choice. All of this is definitely intentional. And it's so ironic that they literally designed Kuma and all the pacifista to be cogs in the machine. They are tools as part of their system. Kuma having free will was irrelevant in their minds. And now it appears as if Kuma is broken. He's broken, in my opinion, in large part because he has lost his ability to decide. If you really want to put brain cells to it, it's pretty deep. But yeah, I suppose those are my thoughts on the chapter. Obviously, a lot of cool things happening with Egghead. Can't get enough of Kizaru. I hope that we see some more, but I'm not convinced that we will. But something's about to blow up. And, you know, everything around Kizaru is just, the tension is there. But yeah, remember to check out my book, The Booms. Volume 1 and 2 is out. Volume 3 is scheduled for release on October 4th. You can pre-order it. Links in the description as well as pinned in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.